Hey everyone, welcome to the Tory Burch Foundation webinar on growth marketing. I'm Gabrielle Raymond McGee, the Chief Operating Officer of the Tory Burch Foundation. We designed this webinar series to offer support and guidance to small business owners navigating these really difficult times. And I have to say, I'm so excited about today because we're here with growth marketing expert, Susan Sue, who I adore. Susan is the marketing in residence and head of portfolio at Sound Ventures, which is a early stage venture capital firm. And prior to Sound, Susan has led teams, marketing teams at companies like 500 Startups and this little old company you may have heard of, Google. So safe to say we're in excellent hands with Susan today to talk about how you can really scale your business right now. And my hope is that this workshop will really help you think through what specific tactics you can take today to scale your business, grow your customer base. And after Susan's presentation, we're going to have a dedicated portion of time to ask Susan questions. So please use the Q&A box below, type your questions, and we'll get to as many as possible. And welcome, Susan. Without further ado, we're so excited that you're here.
Hi, everyone. Shout, shout, shout. I mean, this is a webinar. It's the middle of the day for some of you. It's the morning for others of you. It's a webinar. I get it. It can be boring, but this is actually really, really exciting. I am going to share my screen and tell you why I'm so excited this lovely Wednesday.
Thank you.
So the first thing to know is that, and Gabrielle sort of mentioned this is a difficult time for SMBs. I think it's a difficult time. I also think it's an incredibly exciting time. And you guys, like this group right here is the cohort that is you're so early in this. Okay, things are just actually, we're at the very beginning of e-commerce. We're at the very beginning of everything coming online. So you are the early adopters of all of this. And I'm really, really excited for you to be the ones to sort of pioneer growth for SMBs and actually live it. So with that, we don't have that much time today and I have a lot of content. So I want to go through things really quickly and leave lots of time for your awesome questions. So I'm Susan, as introduced. I'm super excited to talk to you about growth systems today. Now, that is because growth is one of my all-time favorite subjects. I am obviously incredibly biased. I do growth, but it started even before I quote unquote got into growth. So just to give you a little bit of narrative here so that you understand what growth means. One of my very first jobs was actually as a very, very junior paper pusher / product manager at a social networking company called High Five. I was working on an SMS product, very, very far away from our customers, really working with our engineers and our product team day in and day out. And I hated my job so much, which is really funny because if any of you guys understand the world of technology, product managers are like exalted. It's like a really cool job to have, but I hated it. And the reason why I hated it was because I was so far from our customers. And so I decided that I wanted to switch over to something called marketing because it seemed more fun and more in touch with actual human beings, AKA our users. Now, fast forward a couple of years, the intersection of marketing and product became known as something called growth. So I apprenticed myself to a very successful direct response marketer, a very different type of marketing than what we had been doing at my company, which was essentially only PR. We're going to talk about that in the presentation in a little bit. And my entire life became about user psychology, engagement funnels, numbers, all of that packaged together is what we ended up calling growth a few years later. So without further ado, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about how to build an actual system for growth for your business and why a system is so much more important than specific growth hacks or growth tactics. Okay, so we've already used the G word a lot, but what is it? Is running experiments growth? Is monetization growth? Are Facebook ads growth? Is Google SEO growth? A lot of experts who talk about growth are essentially talking about one or a couple aspects of growth, a few hactics, as I call them, to get you better results in one area of your business, one time, or maybe for a finite period of time. But I'm going to ask you to step back and zoom out and join me on a much bigger picture understanding of growth so that you can build a growth engine for your business that is flexible because the market landscape is always changing and custom, because your business can't afford to grow unprofitably in the way that so many businesses, Airbnb, Uber, even Amazon, do grow unprofitably. So growth is basically applied systems thinking. I put this here because Donella H. Meadows is my personal hero. She wrote this book called Thinking in Systems. I highly recommend you all read it in your spare time. It will put you right to sleep on any sleepless night because it's quite dense, but so good. And here's what we learned from Ms. Meadows. This diagram shows a simple system with a stock, inflows, and outflows. Now, we also here have feedback loops, which are the key place where growth magic happens. Here's what that same diagram looks like when we apply it to traffic and users or customers. In this case, we have multiple traffic sources and multiple inflows that are structured as continuous feedback loops. Okay, so what do feedback loops and these cloud shapes have to do with generating more sales? From a systems perspective, growth is the process of building reinforcing feedback loops to increase our stock of customers at increasing rates. So we're not just looking to increase users and customers, but we're looking to increase them at increasing rates. Just like feedback loops in any other system tend to compound gains or losses as they gain momentum. In other words, what we're looking for when we build growth is repeatability and scale. Instead of one-off social media blasts or influencer posts, we're looking for efforts that, once we set them up, can serve as a continuous source of new traffic, some of which becomes new customers, all on its own. Now, how do we put this to work? The first step is to build a growth model, and this is going to be your homework from this session, so listen up. What the heck is a growth model? A growth model is a map of how your business grows, not just right now, not just today or this week, but far into the future. It maps out all of the inputs to your traffic, aka your sources of traffic, the inputs, and it also maps out how you nurture raw traffic into customerhood. And then it maps out how you retain those customers or keep them coming back to your business so you don't have to go and acquire them over and over and over again. Here's a sample growth model that I built recently for one of my portfolio companies at Sound. So in this model for a company that does something in the real estate space, it's quite a complex company. You don't have to have one that looks anything like this, but I think it's a really great example that I want to walk you through. In the bottom layer, we have this is for building awareness. These are our linear growth levers. We'll explain what linear means in a second, but essentially this is how they find out about you in the first place. So we're here for this particular company. We have PR, we have OOH, which stands for out of home. So out of home is literally what it sounds like. It's any advertising that people encounter when they're outside of the house. So think billboards. We have field marketing, which is like, different activations, passing out free samples, all that kind of stuff. That's field marketing. It's called that because you're kind of in the field. And then for them, partners are a really important linear channel. And so my recommendation for this audience here, small to medium-sized businesses, is that you have at least 2 linear levers for driving awareness. So this is just some examples of linear levers that are here on the model, but you should probably have at least 2 here. The next layer in our layer cake is our acquisition layer. Now, awareness and acquisition are different because awareness is like, look, you see a billboard for the Calm app or something like that, and then you know about Calm, but that doesn't mean that you become a user of Calm. You then have to go online, maybe you Google it, maybe you see an ad, that becomes acquisition. So this is exactly how they convert from just kind of knowing about you into an actual customer or potentially even a subscriber. Now here for this company, they have paid acquisition or ads, SEO is a component, they have an agents portal, that's another component for them, offline direct response. In this case, I was specifically referring to direct mail. Direct response simply just refers to, if you ever hear that term, it just refers to there's a piece of marketing and you respond to it right away, so they get that money in right away, as opposed to like billboards or PR, there's like no way to respond right away. And then finally, referrals. Now for this group, you should have at least 2 acquisition loops as part of your growth mix. 1 is not enough. It's good to start with 1, but you need at least 2 because you really need to layer the ways that you're acquiring users or customers. The next layer is all about engagement. So this is or nurture. This is all about how we take those users or customers that we've freshly acquired and actually nurture them to drive more value for both sides, more value for the customer and more value for us. If you're a customer of Outdoor Voices, if you buy more stuff from Outdoor Voices, you're getting more value. If you are Outdoor Voices and you nurture that customer to buy more stuff from you, then you're also getting more value from that relationship. So here for this group, I recommend at least 3 different ways to nurture your customers. And you'll notice the numbers are starting to go up at the nurture level. That's because whereas a lot of business owners tend to focus on acquisition, because you want to get those customers in the door, bank that sale. It's actually about the relationship that happens after that first transaction. It's about how you nurture that relationship so that you have a lot of long-term book of business, as opposed to just having to, again, pay for every single customer that comes in the door. Our last layer is all about retention. So this is, more appropriately retention for subscription businesses. But even if you're not a subscription business, and we'll talk about this in a second, there are different surfaces that you can retain a customer on. Look, if you sell, if you sell Stairmasters, this is like, what am I stuck in, like 1995? Who still has a Stairmaster? But if you sell Stairmasters, that's not something that people buy every day. They buy it once and they're probably never going to buy it again, right? But how can you still build retention, a retained relationship, at least to your brand with that customer, even if they're not going to buy your like $2,000 Peloton again? So for this group, we recommend that you have at least one retention mechanism built into your growth model. So we'll get into all of that, but this is sort of the way that final output will look. Now, I also want to call out one other distinction in growth, which is that there are these 2 flavors of growth. You heard Gabrielle talk about growth marketing, but there's also something called growth product. Now, growth marketing is essentially your messaging layer, and it includes everything from ads, which is performance marketing, SEO, email marketing, copy-based conversion optimization, so changing a word from join to subscribe, stuff like that. And this is really impossible to do without marketers or like a marketing mindset. On the other side, we have something called growth product, which is like technical SEO. It's engagement devices like a mortgage calculator. It's contact capture forms, so like a pop-up that grabs emails. It could be conversion or upsell flow. So like in your Shopify store, you have like, oh, do you want to do these add-ons, or different kind of cart optimizations? That's all on the product side, because it's actually touching some software there. Now, this is really hard to do without engineers. Nowadays, there's a lot of off-the-shelf kind of software tools that can help you with some of these things, but those tools still were created by engineers somewhere. So I consider this like an engineering kind of category. Now, they both play a really important role, and high growth companies lean hard on both of them. Here's kind of how they differentiate. Growth marketing is really just kind of your way to get started. It generates top of funnel traffic. TOFU means top of funnel. And growth product takes that traffic and puts it into an engine that scales it. Now, I think in this case, you don't have to worry too much about growth product, but do keep in mind that, for example, if you have an e-commerce store, you want to be thinking not just about how you get traffic in the door, but also that's on the growth marketing side, but also how do you set up your website, your actual website, to convert as best possible, so that you're not losing a lot of those users that are coming in through the door. And I see Gabrielle popping up here.
Thanks, Susan. Just two quick call outs. We have a number of folks asking what these shorthand notes mean. So OOH means out of home, right?
Yes.
And then some folks were asking, I think you were using the acronym for small business.
Oh, SMB, small to medium-sized businesses. Yeah.
So that's okay. Just want to make sure everyone gets that. And go ahead.
Okay, cool. So I want to just call out a note here. We often hear about going viral, and who doesn't want to go viral? Well, now in this day and age, it's a little bit weird, but you know what I'm talking about. So on the growth marketing side, going viral or becoming really popular means you're David Dobrik, which is, David Dobrik is probably the #1 YouTuber out there in the world right now. On the growth product side, going viral means you're Dropbox. So it's very, very different things. Dropbox went viral because everybody was sharing Dropbox with other people, because they would share a Dropbox link like, hey, here's my photos, or hey, like try this link, try this tool so that I can get more storage. So that's how Dropbox worked. That's how their virality worked, to capture more users. David Dobrik's virality is all based on content. He creates content, people love, love, love it, and they share it out. Virality is all about sharing, but it's really whether you're sharing the content or whether you're sharing the product itself. Okay, so back to the growth model, 3 basic ingredients: growth loops, engagement and retention loops, and linear inflows. Kind of talked about those earlier, so let's get into exactly what they are. A growth loop, what you really need to know about a growth loop is just that it's self-reinforcing and it has a few steps, okay? So the first basic step is that there's some kind of new user. The second step is they do something on your site, usually a conversion, which then generates some money, some output, and then that can go be reinvested back into getting new users. So you see how this is a little bit different than the way we typically think about linear marketing, which is like, you know, throw a bunch of money at something, hope that it works, and like, let's see what happens. With growth, it's much more, we're looking for that measured feedback loop at all times. Okay, we do one input, the user generate, like let's say I spend $2 on a Facebook ad, the user comes in and buys a $10 pair of socks. That $8 or, you know, like the $4, which would be, I guess, however much I make, will then buy me 2 more users, right? Because it was $2 in the beginning. So that's really how we want to think about a growth loop, is that sort of like self-reinforcing investment mechanism for how we continuously build new usage and customer base into our business. Now, growth also includes linear, like non-self-reinforcing flows, or what I call linear growth, where growth cannot reproduce itself at a meaningful fraction of itself without further inputs. So for example, if you're a tech company, you get written up in TechCrunch, or if you're any other company, you get written up in the New York Times. That's amazing. It's a huge growth lever because they have a huge platform, right? But it's a one-time bump, because the New York Times story isn't going to happen every single week. And even if it did happen every week, what would happen? People would start ignoring it because they don't want to hear about the same business every single week. So other linear inflows besides PR include field marketing. So like think about handing out samples, OOH, or out of home advertising, which is like a big branded billboard. And the reason why that one is not considered a growth loop is because we just really can't measure. We really can't measure how many people came in off the billboard. So this is getting into a really tricky question of what is a growth loop versus linear. Loops are repeatable and have very high upsides, and linear growth requires you to constantly be putting stuff in manually yourself, or the wheel won't turn on its own. So let's just recap what defines a growth loop. So growth loop has to have a short feedback cycle. It has to be short enough so that you can learn whether or not it's working in a time frame that makes sense for your business. It cannot be like a billboard, for example, where you put it out there and then 3 months from now or 6 months from now, you know whether or not it's working. Same for influencer marketing, something that a lot of you may have thought about or even tried. It takes a really long time for that to work, which is why influencer marketing in my book isn't considered to be a loop. It's more linear. Another thing that a growth loop has to have is direct attribution. You have to be able to say, this customer is because I did this thing. These two are connected. That's really hard to do with a billboard. And then finally, ideally, it is also self-reinforcing. So you are basically not having to constantly manually yourself put in new inputs. It's sort of like more like a little machine that you build and you kind of like set it on its way. So in this next section, we're going to cover a few common growth loops that you can use. But again, here's that shape. Just wanted to recap here. Now, in addition to the growth loops, I want to just also say that all loops must happen on a channel. Most people, or many people, often make the mistake of thinking that a marketing channel, such as Facebook, is the same as a marketing strategy. Like, what's your marketing strategy? Oh, Facebook. That's not correct. Instead, a channel, think of a channel as the surface or like the location where growth happens. And there are a couple of things to understand about this surface or this location that govern how every single channel, whether that's Facebook or Instagram or Google or email marketing, how they all work. Now, one of the most important characteristics of channel is that it has some of these different aspects, which is you want to look at basically the audience size, the competition on the channel, and who else, or what are like the kind of rules and regulations that are set on the channel. So basically, we want to be looking at channels that have a large audience, but have decent level of competition, not too much competition, not zero competition, because that doesn't exist out there, and where you have rules that you understand and that are loose enough for you to play around on those channels. Another characteristic of an acquisition loop is actually its branching factor. So this simply just means how many people on average does a single action reach in a single instance. Now, we've heard a lot about word of mouth. You've probably heard the term word of mouth before, like, oh, how do you grow? Well, I want people to find out about my business via word of mouth. Here's the thing to know about word of mouth. Branching factor is really, really important because it specifically refers to how many people is one customer going to tell about your product. And here's where it differs by business. Let's say you have an STD medication product. You're probably going to have a really, really low branching factor, because if I have an STD and I use your product and it's really successful for me, I'm going to be super happy. But am I going to tell all my friends? Probably not. Really, really low branching factor there. By contrast, a high branching factor might happen for a product like this Chrome extension, Lolly, which gives people Bitcoin back every time they shop on different online sites, online stores. And people are really proud of the fact that they earn Bitcoin, so they go and tell all their friends, and therefore Lolly has a really high branching factor. The final, or not the final, this almost final characteristic of acquisition loops is conversion rate. This one's super, super important. You want to think about how many people are actually taking the action that you're asking them to take, whether that's clicking on an ad, buying your hats, or signing up for your email list. That's all conversion rate. So people coming in the door versus people coming in and doing what you want. That's kind of like your conversion rate, I guess, would actually be calculated. People doing what you want is the numerator, and the denominator is like total people that came in the door. This is a companion metric to branching factor, where a high conversion rate on a growth action can actually make up for a low branching factor. So going back to that STD solution, look, I'm not going to tell very many people, but if one of my friends lets me know that they also have chlamydia or whatever it is, and I tell them, hey, this medication worked for me, what is my conversion rate going to be on that action? 100%, right? Like, oh, it worked for you? Give it to me now. So that's just a way to think about conversion rate. Now, final characteristic of an acquisition loop is that is payback velocity. This doesn't need to be modeled onto the loop, but I just want you guys to be thinking about it, because payback velocity is really, really important when assessing whatever our strategy is. How quickly can we get our money back, number one, but also how quickly can we know that it's working? So going back to influencer marketing can be really expensive. It can be really, really effective. But here's the thing, when you hear about like this or that business was so successful using influencer marketing, you should be asking, how much did they spend? And how much time did it take for that spend to come back into the business? And you might hear, oh, it took 6 months. Oh, it took 9 months. SEO, super long payback velocity. SEO is amazing. It works really well. Don't expect it to pay you back anytime before the 9th or the 12th month. Can you wait until the 9th or the 12th month? If you can't, then this is where payback velocity is definitely a factor that you want to be considering. Okay, so here's the good stuff. This is all the main channels that every early stage business should be thinking about. So I've kind of structured these from easier to harder. Doesn't mean that you should avoid the harder ones. It doesn't mean that you should just go for the easier ones. You actually need a mix. And the reason why is because the techniques that are harder, the strategies that are harder to pursue also have less competition. So they're actually really good to go for. They will help you to build a moat around your business, but it takes longer to actually see the return from that. So for finding customers, ads cannot be beat. Now I know I think last week we had a presenter that talked about like avoiding ads. I think ads are terrible if you're doing brand marketing. Ads are not the way to get your brand out there, but ads are absolutely the way to get sales. There's a really big difference between advertising for brand awareness versus advertising for something called direct response, which is a term we talked about earlier. For brand awareness, let's say you're Coca-Cola and you're doing ads on Facebook for brand awareness. Do you care about whether or not you have a 100% return on ad spend? That means for every dollar you spend, you make $1 back. No, you don't care, because your alternative is advertising on billboards where you get no return on that $50,000 billboard buy. So for brand marketing, they just care about getting the impression, like getting a logo in your news feed or getting a logo in your Instagram feed. And so brands are willing to pay a lot for that. And it's very, very competitive and difficult to compete with brands like Coca-Cola on brand marketing. Direct response marketing is all about targeting specific people, or letting Facebook help you target specific people that are going to be most likely to actually click, and not just click, but buy. That is very different than brand. Brand is, we just want you to see our brand, remember us, be aware of us, we're Nike, we're Coke, etc. Okay? On the direct response side, it's much more like, I'm this D2C e-commerce you've never heard of. I don't care if you know my brand. I want you to buy my necklaces. Okay, so here's where finding customers online, ads on FB, IG, Twitter, Snap has a new ads product out right now. This is actually one of the easiest ways to just get a customer this week immediately. It's very hard to do it well, but it's very easy to get started. There's also ads on search, and I think also paid and organic Pinterest is also a really good opportunity, especially if you're in the home goods space or anything that's a little bit more visual. By the way, a lot of men on Pinterest too. So if you sell to men, that's a really interesting opportunity because a lot of men facing brands don't know to go onto Pinterest. Now on the harder side for finding customers, any type of SEO. And that's primarily because SEO requires a lot of work. You have to create a lot of content. One blog post once a week is not SEO. SEO, you're competing with Credit Karma, Zillow, like a lot of Wikipedia, WikiHow, WebMD. There's like all of these big brands that create how many millions of articles in order to rank and make sure that their content blankets Google search. So it's very, very hard to compete on SEO. It's not impossible. Especially if you're in a really specific product niche or vertical that's like really specific and you can capture specific keywords. But what I recommend to determine whether or not SEO is actually an opportunity for your business is to go on a tool like Ahrefs or, just Google keyword volume tool. And you can actually see, is there volume for the keywords that I want to go after? Search volume. If there's no search volume, if people aren't searching for it, SEO is not going to work for you. And then I also have influencers under the harder category simply because it takes a long time and it's expensive. It takes 3 to 6 months minimum, and it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which until you've reached a certain point of scale in your business, it doesn't really make sense to go there. On the nurturing and engaging side, definitely super easy to get started right away is email marketing, SMS, and even paid retargeting, where you are basically, kind of reminding the people who've already come to your website that you still exist. You do that on Facebook and via Facebook ads. And then what's harder is influencer, and surprisingly, I have organic social here under harder. And the reason why is because while it's easy and almost like negligible effort to set up a Facebook page or an Instagram account or a TikTok account and start engaging with your customer or with your audience on social, it's very hard to do it well. I see most brands do a really, really crappy job at this. So I put this under harder because look, if Urban Outfitters can't even master this, then, right? So this is where I consider organic social to be a little bit actually on the harder side. Now, remember, I have this little saying here, there's no such thing as a free lunch. I don't mean to be negative, but this is really important to remember. If you are looking to not spend any money on marketing, then you're going to have to spend more time and effort. If you are looking to go faster on marketing, then you're going to have to spend more money. They're just inversely related that way. And that's just kind of like one of the rules of the universe, supposedly. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind here, as a small business entrepreneur, you cannot afford to pursue only linear inputs, so like that brandy stuff, because every effort costs time and money, both of which are finite. Instead, with every growth or marketing idea or campaign or new initiative, I really want you to ask yourself, is this helping me to build repeatable growth? Can I eventually make myself obsolete in this process? Now let's look at the common growth loops for building repeatable, self-operating traffic engine. Okay, so the first one is, we talked about SEO. This is a user-generated content SEO. I use TripAdvisor as my ultimate pie-in-the-sky example here. A new user comes in, writes a review. That review content gets indexed by search engines, Google and others, which then brings in a new user because people are searching for this stuff all the time, which then brings in a new user. That user writes a review. That review gets indexed by search engines. That brings in a third new user, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, next one is our paid acquisition loop. So the thing to know about this is it's best for low consideration. And by the way, on the SEO one, I forgot to mention that it's best for high consideration products where people really have to think hard about whether they're going to buy it or not, either because it's expensive or it's just a big commitment, because that content really helps people to make that decision. For ads, it's really great if you have a product that's a low price point, below $200. People can kind of make a snap decision right away. It's almost an impulse purchase. They can make it right there, then and there. So again, similar to an SEO loop, we basically have a new user that comes in, an X percentage convert to the paid product, i.e. they actually buy your thing. That revenue buys more ads. Those ads get more audience. That audience becomes new users, generates revenue, and so on and so forth. In this case, I use the e-commerce site Hims as an example. The referral loop is great for high LTV categories, high lifetime value. So where you know that, like, if you're a Stitch Fix, your lifetime value of a customer, because they pay every month or they come back over and over again, is a lot higher than just the initial purchase. It's not just like that $40 initial purchase. Maybe their lifetime value is actually $300 because they come back like 9 different times or whatnot. So with a referral loop, you basically need existing users for this to work. Those users would have an invite incentive. So like, get $20 if you invite your friends, and then they take the invite action, and that generates new users. This is your classic give-get two-sided referral program where for Stitch Fix, where the recipient gets $20 and the sender gets $20. And one thing that I would just encourage you on this one is to ask yourself, what channels make this flow possible? Email, social platforms, direct messaging like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger. There needs to be a channel for that communication between user 1 and user 2 to happen. Now, finally, we have our organic viral loop. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because this is almost totally irrelevant for small to medium-sized businesses, but I do want you guys to just keep in mind that these tech companies that you hear about in the news every day, like Slack or Dropbox, they primarily grow using organic virality, where one user installs the software and invites another user to use the software as part of the natural usage pattern. So like my favorite thing that I always say is, you can't Slack with yourself. So if you use Slack, guaranteed you're bringing in somebody else with you. Or if you're using Slack, it's because somebody else brought you in. That's organic virality at work. Now, I want to just do a really quick case study here. So this is a company that a friend of mine is working with. It's called PopCuff. This business is an SMB. I would consider them to be a small to medium-sized business. Husband and wife, founders and owners. They were doing approximately $18K a month last November. So they were doing quite well already with this like single kind of like patented hair like scrunchie type thing that they invented. But they scaled that to 120K a month by March. How did they do that? I am going to reveal the magic formula, which was for acquisition. They just used ads. Yup, that's it. They had some ambassador stuff going. They had some influencer stuff going. None of that contributed to any of the scale that they saw in the results. On linear acquisition, linear meaning like that one-time bump, yes, they did have influencers. Yes, they used social media. Yes, they had like maybe a couple of press stories because the founders are like really nice. They're just like this adorable couple that is very press friendly. And then on retention, they use email marketing via Klaviyo. They use SMS via PostScript. They're a Shopify store. So all of these tools, you can just like go to the third-party app store and just like quickly add them in. But the number one thing that contributed to the revenue jump that you see from November through March, guess what it was? It was actually on the product side, so simple, creating bundles. And here's the thing. They would come in. So this little PopCuff product, I think it costs like $10 or $15. It's really cheap, very, very low average order value. So how do you make $120,000 in a month from something that costs $15 per item? Well, you create items that are big old bundles that have 3 of them, like what you see here in this screenshot. So this is an example of how it's really, really great to think about marketing and bringing in more traffic and more customers, but don't neglect thinking about what's happening on the product side. It could be as simple as, wow, if we create bundles, or if we do upsells, or if we create like, more, product, like shop the look type product groupings, that actually drives up average order value drastically. And then we can even afford to buy more users who are buying more stuff because of our bundles. So that's kind of how we want it to work. Now, my friend Tommy actually runs all the growth marketing for this business. And I don't know how we could, like, maybe we can share this in the chat somehow. I can figure out how to share this link, but they actually did a video podcast with him, interviewing him. The founders interviewed him on all the things that he did for their business. It's about 50 minutes long. It's so good. It's like the kind of thing you'll just like sit back and want to just hear them talk about it. He's very comforting of a person. So it's just kind of like a nice, if you're on a drive somewhere, just like put this on in the background. We'll make sure we can get this link out to you guys, but it talks specifically about PopCuff and how they did it. Okay, so what I was talking about on the previous slide, 2 things that you want to know, 2 amazing tools for getting intel as well as inspiration. So one is called builtwith.com. You can install this as a Chrome extension and you can find out you can spy on any website you see out there. You can see what technology they're using. You can see whether they're using WooCommerce, BigCommerce, or Shopify. You can see whether they're using MailChimp for their email marketing or Klaviyo for their email marketing. You can see what they're using for SMS. You can see whether they're using Facebook ads and what type, all that kind of stuff. So Built With, install the Chrome extension. It's tons of fun. Love spying on competitor sites. Ad library, Facebook ad library, another great trick where you can actually go in here and search for the specific advertiser's name. So like Urban Outfitters, let's put that one in there. You can see the ads. This is not super recent and it doesn't show all of their ads because there's tons of tricky stuff back there, but gives you a really great basic idea of the ads that any other brand has been running. Also fun, you can check out the political ads that the different politicians have been running, just pro tip there. And you can see what's been working and you can like literally copy their ads, structure. You can like get lots of learnings and inspiration from the way their ad creatives are set up if you are not as experienced on Facebook ads. Okay, so final note about LTV, again, lifetime value. Before we wrap up on retention and get to your questions, I want to just mention that lifetime value is so important to understand because it gives you the full picture of how much each customer should be worth to your business and therefore tells you how much you can safely spend to acquire a new customer. So I advise a company that is a fashion e-commerce. They are acquiring most of their users on Facebook and they focus on ROAS, return on ad spend. So they want to say like, okay, we spent $10 on Facebook, we made $20 for our store. That's like the metric that they're focused on. Now, what's wrong with that is that you spend $10 on Facebook, you get, let's say you get a couple of customers, you get 2 customers. These are not real numbers, these are like monopoly numbers. Let's say you get 2 customers for the $10. Now those 2 customers each buy something for $10 each, so that's where the $20 comes from, okay? But let's say those 2 customers come back next month, or no, next week, impulse purchase. They come back next week and they buy another thing for another $10 each. So now they've each generated $20. Is your ROAS still the same? Your return on ad spend? The answer is no. And that's because LTV, lifetime value, factors in the idea that customers have a lifetime of relationship with you that could be weeks, months, even years. They're generating value across a lifetime. What is our lifetime value to Amazon? Mine's like tens of thousands of dollars. So how much can Amazon afford to spend to acquire a single customer, knowing that each customer is worth $10,000 to them? Well, by gosh, they could spend up to $3,000 to acquire that customer. But if they were only looking on that return on the same day, like that first purchase, they would think, oh, I can only afford to spend $2 to acquire a customer. $2 versus $3,000 is really, really different. And the $3,000 allows you to be really, really competitive against other advertisers in the ecosystem. So that's why it's really important to understand lifetime value, because it is the true picture of how much you can afford to spend, either in terms of actual dollars or in terms of effort in order to get a customer. The final note here is that, like everything else in the universe and in life, growth loops themselves have a life cycle. They have a lifetime value as well. So just a quick example, a Facebook-centric paid acquisition loop back in 2015 was much, much more effective than it is today. Facebook today has more users, so they have a higher potential branching factor. Remember that, reaching more people, but a lot less engagement. Have we not all noticed that we're spending less time on Facebook these days? So that's a lower potential conversion rate. Additionally, there are so many more advertisers like you all advertising more things in the Facebook ecosystem today than there were 4-6 years ago, which negatively impacts payback velocity because it drives up prices on those same inventory of users. Now, Facebook is still a really, really high efficiency paid acquisition channel, but it's really important that it's unlikely to stay that way forever. So remember this is your good old classic contact importer from back in 2006. It definitely worked really well to get a bunch of users to use your software product back in 2006 because everybody was like, sure, import all my contacts. But now if you encounter one of these, ask yourself what you would do. You would just click the skip button right away, right? So that is why it's so important to pay attention to the other side of growth, which we're going to talk about just for 2 seconds here, retention. Retention is critical because you should never pay for the same customer more than once. Retention is happening right here. It's happening right before the users flow out to be anonymous traffic again. So retention happens when they're still your customer. They're still active within your system. Your typical retention loop has 4 ingredients: a trigger or a reason why your users might be interested in coming back. This could be a sale, back in stock, or a new product launch. This is kind of the offer. It also has a channel, and this is the channel through which you can communicate to your customers about that offer. So for example, it could be email, it could be SMS, it could be your organic social media. Third, it has a reward. And this part is so, so crucial because it often gets overlooked. You're asking someone to do something. If you ask your neighbor to come over and like help you mow your lawn, would you not even say thank you? Of course you'd say thank you. So if you're going to ask someone to do something, you have to give them a thank you for doing it. This reward could be a special discount for your loyal customers. It could be exclusive access to something that is time limited or volume limited. Limited, so like, you know, limited number of these back in stock, get them while they last. Like that is even its own thank you because you're giving them access to something exclusive. Now, the final ingredient here is the action you want your customer to take. Is it a purchase action or is it a different type of action like a social media share or creating some user-generated content or something else that drives marketing value back to your business? So standard retention loop has these 4 ingredients: the offer, the channel, the thank you, like a discount or exclusive access, and the specific action you're asking them to do, whether that's to buy something right off the bat, or maybe it's just to leave a review or, you know, share their opinion or whatever it is. A lot of small businesses make the mistake of always asking for a purchase action. Now, that's a little bit of a mistake because you can actually retain your customers on so many different surfaces. I understand the drive towards a purchase action because you're focused on cash flow, making ends meet, etc. But here's other ways that you can retain customers. You can retain customers on your brand. So for example, I love you, but it doesn't make sense for me to buy right now because I just bought a house, so I don't need another one. Or like, I just bought a super expensive Lululemon jacket, so I don't need another one. But how do you still nurture that brand love? Okay, so that's retaining them to the brand. Second is on the actual product itself. I love you and I want to keep using you, but I can't afford to right now, or, you know, whatever. I don't want to pay right now. Spotify, you have a free version of Spotify. You can always downgrade, continue retaining to the product, even if you're not retained on the paid subscription. Third is on revenue. So I might be placing fewer orders or I have fewer people using your product. This is for MailChimp. But every time I come, I'm spending more money. So that would be like a Costco situation. MailChimp would be like, you know, maybe you have fewer users, but they're sending more emails so that the volume is going higher. So like the company's actually making more money, even though they have fewer users. So just a little peek at all the different things that retention can do for you. Now, finally, retention loops aren't the only way to build stickiness. You can also build defensive moats through network effects if you have a database network effect. Some of these are not necessarily relevant for you guys, so I'm just going to focus on the brand moat and the scale moat. Walmart has an amazing scale moat. The more stuff that they buy, the more buying power that they have, and they're able to deliver cheaper prices on account of that, and that gives them defensibility for their business. Disney has a brand moat where we care about stuff that's Disney branded versus like off-brand, and we're willing to pay more. Which brings me to the last point, that how do you know you have defensibility? Because defensibility results in pricing power. You are literally able to charge more for a product, either more money or more effort on the part of the user than your competitors, just because you have a defensive moat. So that's the power of defensibility. And phew, we made it. But don't get too comfortable. The last thing to know about growth, besides all this other content, is that it really never ends. And that's what's so exciting about it. Channels are constantly emerging, blossoming, decaying, and behavioral norms themselves are also changing. Therefore, growth is a forever project. And I think that's what's really, really fun about it. Keeps it super exciting and intellectually interesting as well. So happy to take a few questions. I think we have till 15 more minutes, right?
Yes. So okay. Susan, that was a fabulous boot camp in growth. So thank you for walking us all through. And we have a number of questions to clarify. So SEO tools that you recommend are?
So some great SEO tools. I would actually go, I think even just basic Google Keyword Planner. There's one called WordStream. I think that's free. I really like Ahrefs, Ahrefs. It's so annoying, their name, but it's not free, but they have a 7-day free trial. So you could use that one, but there's tons out there. You really can't go wrong. Like really anything that you try is better than nothing. And for those of you that have a little bit of money to spend, one tool that I love, love, love is called ClearScope. I think their website is clearscope.io, ClearScope. And it's a tool that actually lets you optimize your content. So if you are creating SEO content, it'll like give you a grade, like A, B, C, D, like your content's a B, here's how you can make it an A. So you can actually make edits in real time, and they'll tell you how to improve a piece of content for search optimization.
Great. And a number of folks are very curious about that Chrome extension. I think you said it was called Built With. Is that right?
Yeah, Built With.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And it's free. So
it's free. Great. And for Facebook, it's Facebook Ad Library. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Just Google Facebook Ad Library. I think it's like .com/ad/library, but just Google it and then you'll find the Facebook Ads Library.
Great. Well, let's dive in because I know we have a lot to still get to. So for the startups, there are so many incredible founders that just started a company recently, whether it be in the midst of COVID or today. With limited budgets, what do you recommend as the most effective strategy, most effective tactic to really grow your sales and not go into debt?
So, I mean, I think the number one thing to really focus on is creating an amazing product that is truly differentiated and better than the competition. That is probably an area that needs to be addressed even before you go into marketing. And then I would actually, it's not about like finding one or two tactics. I think it's more about the approach. So the way that I would actually do that is I would create that great product, and then I would, or like, figure out what the idea is without necessarily, if you have to manufacture it, maybe before you get to that step. And then I would actually create ads on Facebook that would basically give me a lightweight minimum viable test for me to understand basically what does my growth profile look like? Like how much can I expect to do on this channel? I do think that, even though ads are really scary, it's the fastest way for you to learn whether or not things are going to resonate with your audience. So for example, let's say you have a really cool like back scratcher product. I'm just making stuff up here, back scratcher, okay? But you want to know whether or not you should say it's a back scratcher, or whether you want to say it's a back massager, or whether you want to make it more like, for women, or more for men, or more for kids, or whatever it is. That stuff is, all of those decisions are really, really important, and you make the wrong decision and it could actually directly impact your sales. Ads can do something else besides just bring you a customer. It can tell you, should you market to women? Should you market to men? Should you say the word scratcher? Or should you say the word massager? Should you show the blue one, or should you show the black one? It can give you a lot of information as to exactly how you should present your product in a very, very cheap way. I mean, I'm talking about like $50, $100 tests on Facebook. I'm not talking about spending $500,000 like Mike Bloomberg did in a single day, or whatever it is.
And so for founders that are maybe a little further down the path, they've been in business for a while, they're trying to figure out how to scale their own operations. When do they know that they should work with a small shop or an agency or a freelancer to help them with ads specifically? And when should they just do it themselves and learn what's under the hood of the car, as we talked about?
I think it's really important to do a little bit yourself, just so that you don't get the wool pulled over your eyes. But for the most part, you're not going to become an expert in ads, because there are people that literally do that all the live long day, and they do it across many, many accounts. So their learning surface is that much broader. Like they have so many repetitions to be able to learn and get smarter from, versus like you just have your one business. So I actually highly recommend going the specialist route as quickly as you can, as early as you're able to afford it. And a lot of times, specialists will work, especially for performance advertising, for paid marketing, they'll often work on like a commission basis. So that can sometimes be helpful in terms of like lowering the upfront cost. They'll maybe more like take a percentage of the spend that you're looking to spend. And the reason why that works is because you can only spend as much as, like, let's say you say, I want to spend up to $10,000 a month at this profitability threshold. So if your ads manager can like get you to that 10,000 mark, then he or she would maybe take like 10% of that as their payment, or whatever, whatever numbers you agree on. But if they can only spend $1,000 profitably, that's the key asterisk there, then that's how, like, you're not going to be ending up paying for that entire $10,000 spend.
And how would you even go about finding a trustworthy source to work with? Because I know with our Tory Burch Fellows, we've had a lot of conversations, and we often say it's like going to the mechanic and taking advantage of and not knowing what's under the hood of the car. How do you find that right expert? I like the idea of a commission base, so there's some skin in the game. But how would you even go about finding that right source?
I think my number one thing would actually be to look at customers that are, I would just like ask people that I look up to that are also businesses that are having some success. I think like there is no good repository, and it's all still very much referral based. And then once you do get some referrals, you need to audit them, and you need to like sort of race the horses against each other and see what are reference customers saying. I would definitely look at that. I would make sure that the reference customers are also in an adjacent, similar category or like similar profile of business. So are they like literally in the same vertical, or are they not in the same vertical, but they maybe like appeal to the same type of audience, or none of the above, but maybe they're like working with companies at the same stage as where you currently are at.
Okay. And so many entrepreneurs in our community are in the service space. So they don't necessarily have a product. And based on your presentation, I feel like all of your lessons still apply to that space, but do you have any tips specifically for service founders that are trying to figure out how to apply these tools to an industry that's not product specific?
Yes, I absolutely do. So once upon a time, my husband, who is from Spain, when he first came to the United States, he was teaching Spanish classes offline and in person. And how did he market that business? He actually grew a really, really good book of business and was busy all the time. And like now he works at Apple, all this crazy stuff. But like once upon a time, he was an in-person Spanish teacher. And so here's how he did it. And I think this applies for any service business. You want to look at so the challenge with service businesses is like, what is that scale, right? Like what's your Facebook? Your Facebook is Yelp, Google Maps, and any other local directory, because services are oftentimes very locally focused. Even if your service is virtual, like you do it over Zoom or whatever, I still think you need to get on the local directories and list yourself in every single locale that you possibly can. And the reason for that is because from a customer perspective, it's not about you and where you're located. It's about the customer and what is their discovery path to finding your service. So if I'm looking for a tutor for my kid, I'm most likely going to go to Yelp or Google Maps or maybe just Google, but I'm going to say like tutor Los Angeles, right? I'm not just going to be like tutor any kind. And so that's where for service businesses, you really want to think local and start there, as well as think about what are the local activations. Another thing that he did that was really successful was actually using meetup.com to create meetups around his topical area, which helps you to build a community. He actually had like a lot of people, hundreds of people started just organically joining his meetup that, he didn't market it, just like they naturally found it on meetup.com. He held some actual in-person meetups, and that was a really important lead gen mechanism for him as well. Plus it was really fun. So those are just like some ideas for how you can get started with service businesses. Is mainly would focus on local and really bringing people together around your category, as well as creating a little bit of thought leadership so that it's not just, let's say you're an accountant. You're not just only going to be talking about accounting, but maybe you talk about, okay, like financial planning or like financial stability during times of crisis. Like maybe you want to put together a dinner around that, or even just like a coffee session at your local coffee shop, whatever it is.
Great. And what about B2B? Because there are many B2B founders here.
So B2B, man, I love B2B. It depends on, I think, so many different factors, particularly pricing and how much revenue you get per user is a really important factor in determining what your growth mix can and should be. I think in the beginning, a lot of B2B, depending on how early you are, right? In the beginning, a lot of it is just like sales. It's not even really marketing. It's primarily just like hitting the pavement and going and getting a lot like customers, even just manually as the founder. Now let's say, okay, I've already done that. Now what do I do? I've gotten some customers, I've gotten some sales. So now you want to actually, that's when you want to layer marketing in so that you can make sales go faster, close sales faster, as well as just create more materials to support that sales process. And then phase 3 would actually be to build out the top of funnel, your demand generation engine, which can also be ads. Okay, so ads on LinkedIn, which are really expensive. But again, if you're selling B2B, maybe you can afford to pay higher prices. And LinkedIn is really effective, particularly for lead generation. Or it could be content. So that would be the SEO play, where it's not necessarily your customers are creating content, but you, the business, you hire a writer and you're creating content on a high cadence basis. You can also use that content for some of your product marketing. But in summary, it really needs to start with founder-led sales, followed by, maybe creating some marketing materials, followed by, okay, how can I create more leads at the top of the funnel? Followed by, okay, maybe now it's time to invest in content and SEO, even though Susan said that they're really hard, but I got to do it.
And in that funnel, knowing who's the decision maker at these companies, right? I feel like you can spend a lot of money with the wrong people when you're in B2B. So I feel like that's key,
absolutely.
right?
And I think that starts with sales. And that's why just going in there and doing founder-led sales is so important, because don't be above it. It's really, really critical for you to understand firsthand exactly what the concerns are, and even understand, oh my gosh, I've been talking for 2 weeks to the wrong person. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a really good lesson. Then you'll learn, okay, how do I get to the right person faster than 14 days out?
Great. Let's talk a little more about social, because we have so many questions on this topic. Can you speak more about the process of evaluating and deciding on the right social strategy? I know you said Facebook is not a strategy, right? What else should our community know in regards to utilizing social in the right way?
Yeah, it's so funny. I think social media is more important today than it ever has been before. I am definitely one of those more product-y growth people that used to really write off social media. And I've seen in most of the companies that I've been a part of or advised, they also do the same. And so usually your social media person is a junior, okay, let's just get an intern to do social. How many times have you said that or heard that? Now, the reason why that's so wrong is because I have seen with my own 2 eyes, organic social drive tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue. It is a really, really powerful force, because people are engaging in a much more authentic way than if you're just paying to be able to speak to them. Now, in terms of a strategy, I think, again, kind of going back to what we talked about in the presentation, it's all about your channel. So what are the channels that are a good fit for your audience? Are you trying to do social media to 18-year-olds? Well, Facebook is probably not the best place to invest. Are you selling a product that you're trying to build a community of 65-year-olds? Okay, TikTok is probably not the best place to invest in building your social strategy. So first, think about channel and what is a good channel fit for your audience as well as for your product. And then in terms of the actual content, look, I think the number one thing that's really important to keep in mind for all social is there's so many little tactics, but the number one thing is really, what is the story? Do you have a narrative? What's the actual story that you're telling? Again, it sounds so soft and fuzzy, but if you just get out there and you create a Facebook or Instagram page and you just blast out check out this t-shirt, check out that t-shirt, this one's on sale, this one's going fast, we have a blue one of this one, now we have a red version of this one. That is not a story. That's just a guy on the street corner with a megaphone and a sandwich board is what that is, okay? Instead, you really want to have an actual compelling narrative that is worked into your social. So that could be anything from, okay, we're a community of moms that care about, we're a community of moms that care about our kids and our pets. This is pet and kids world. Okay. And so then you create all the storytelling around that, and you really build out a holistic story experience on social. The other things to remember about social strategy is a little bit tactical, but consistency is key. Before you figure out what's the magic, just figure out how can you post every single day. Okay. How can you make sure that you post at the same times on the same days, every single day on every single channel? Be consistent. Another really important trick is that it is great to get efficiency and use a tool like Buffer and schedulers and things like that help, but it's also really great to post natively directly to platforms, because the content formatting is going to be better and that platform is going to be a lot happier and actually show your post to more people. Number 3 is really the images and the creatives are so, so important, and they're part of the story. So again, don't just show that red t-shirt and say, we've got them now. Actually tell a story about the red t-shirt. And I know that you can tell a story about a red t-shirt because we all know the French movie from the 80s, The Red Balloon. Does anybody know? Where it's just a silent movie. It's in color, it's silent, and it's just about a red balloon. but it tells an entire story. So I think that's really the lesson that we want to take away is social is about storytelling. It's about building authentic relationships with people. So you really want to be engaging. Like, don't let there be a bunch of comments that you don't reply to. Reply to those comments. And finally, as you're starting to see the theme to all of this, is that social requires a dedicated owner. It's actually a pretty big area and isn't something that an intern or 10% of a founder's time can really take care of in the right way.
Well, that's a really nice segue to Bee's question. So she owns a company called Women Repair Zone, which sounds brilliant to me. She provides workshops taught by women for women to do home repair, home improvement, and auto maintenance. And due to COVID, she's had to pivot from having these workshops in person to online. And she now has the potential to reach women nationally. And so her question for you is, how does she attract the right audience nationally? And I know a number of folks have asked about social algorithms, messing them up and reaching the wrong people. So how do you really reach the right person when you're going broad?
Yeah, and I love that business. And I think for that particular business, what I would really think about is, who is the who? Like, who is that exact customer? Is it just all women? If you say it's all women, that's not going to work. Let's get really, really specific. Eventually, it can be all women, but let's like tier that out. Okay, so like phase one is this type of woman. Moms who's like let's get really specific. Okay, like moms whose kids have left the nest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can actually start doing some targeting to those people. The way that I would do it is with my like initial kind of like subset. Let's say it's moms whose kids have left the nest. I know that one's like a terrible segment, but just kind of go with me. It's in my mind now and I can't get it out. So then you would say like, okay, let's create a landing page specifically for that type of persona. You can use tools like Unbounce or any like quick landing page creator. Just like Google it. There's so many tools out there. They're all like, some of them are really cheap. They all have a free trial. You can create a quick landing page that's just like, have your kids left the nest? Wondering what you need to do these days? Why not repair your car? Like whatever it is, come up with a better story than that, obviously. But you kind of get the picture of where I'm taking you, which is that you want to get really, really specific, even if it's geo-agnostic. It can be geo-agnostic, but identity specific and use case specific. And then I would actually start going to Facebook groups of those people. So there are those moms already on Facebook. They're grouped for other interests. And I would start like asking to be invited to those groups and say like, hey, I'm testing out this new thing for my service. Like, would anybody want to be beta testers? Or does anybody want to try it out and give me feedback? I love the like, especially if you're doing something new, like branching into new geos and it's virtual instead of offline. There's like a bunch of new things in there. So I really think taking a testy approach is the right way. And then from there, I would actually start branching out more and more and more audiences using that same like ad to landing page to online course type of flow. Because I think there's going to probably be an online course or maybe live webinars or whatever, but something online.
Great. And keep us posted, Bea. Sounds like a really interesting business. Lynn is asking about hashtags. Can you go into that for us, Susan?
Yeah, so I think you mean hashtags for organic social. Mm-hmm. And this is very timely because I was just speaking with my organic social manager for a business that I advise about this. You know, a lot of people I think make the mistake of going for hashtags that are really broad because they think, oh my gosh, like the hashtag cats of Instagram has 2 million people following it, like, or 2 million posts. That's such big reach. I should go for that one, right? Well, yes and no. It's good to get the broad ones, but if you think about the fact that you're going to be up there with like millions of other posts, how are people going to see you through all the noise? So actually, in addition to the broader hashtags, you want to go really, really specific. Keep them short and concise in terms of the number of letters and words, but specific in terms of the identity so that you can reach the specific audience that's going to resonate the most for your product. I would also, just for inspiration on hashtags, I would actually go and look at some, again, I love spying on other businesses. The great thing about Instagram and Facebook is that it's like all public, right? Like nobody can hide from anybody. So you can just go and see what are the hashtags that they're using? Like how do they phrase it so that they get that level of precision yet concision at the same time?
Mm-hmm. Great. Let's talk a little bit about e-commerce and platforms. So we have a question from an entrepreneur who said that their current platform is Etsy, but they're planning to create their own e-commerce site soon. And they're trying to figure out the right marketing strategy to get their current customers to their new site and future customers to their new site. So how do you transition? And this makes me think of all the entrepreneurs that work with wholesalers and have to figure out how to really own their customer base. So let's talk customer base and platforms a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So this is really hard, and it's a good lesson, right? Like, damn, I should have owned that customer from the beginning. So that's the real takeaway here is like, okay, how could I have owned that customer from the beginning through email marketing, for example, through a special offer to follow up, like all these different things. I would actually, from here on out, I think it's very hard to go back and get those previous customers. You might just end up having to like pay for them again, quite honestly. But for every customer from now on going forward, what you should do is definitely incorporate a hook or an offer so that they do subscribe to your email list or become owned by you in your own audience. Follow you on social, subscribe to your email list, subscribe to SMS. And in order for them to do those three things, they need a thank you, right? They need a reason. So what's the offer? Like if you send out a shipment of earrings from Etsy, from your Etsy store, can you include something in the box that says, hey, if you come to my store and sign up for my email list, we'll give you $5 off this same pair of earrings. Not your next order. We'll like give you a rebate on $5 of these earrings or whatever it is. Like go bold. Because if you think about you're spending $5, that's like $5 that you don't have to give Facebook. I'd rather give my customer the $5 personally any day versus Mark Zuckerberg. That's just me. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do, but basically it's all about the customers moving forward and the back customers. I think if you haven't already established a channel by which you can nurture and reach them, then that is too bad. And it's a good lesson to make sure that you establish that channel with as many customers as possible moving forward. You probably do have well, actually, I don't want to get too much into this. You may or may not have their email address, but getting the email address as early as possible and really owning them, that's one thing that Shopify does allow you to do. And I think that's great about their platform.
For paid, we have a number of questions about how you budget for paid advertising. And Carrie was asking specifically if you should take a percentage of yearly sales and allocate that, and what percentage would you recommend? I know it's hard to say not knowing her business, but any like rules that can be broad strokes across the board for entrepreneurs trying to figure out their budget for paid?
Yeah, for sure. So this is a really tricky question, actually. So a couple of factors that you need to think about is, again, that payback. Remember we talked about payback velocity? Well, payback period, like that really matters in terms of what kind of answer you're going to get. So do you want to be paid back the same day? Do you want to be paid back in a week? Do you want to be paid back in a month or in a year? The longer you make that payback period, the more room you have to be flexible and to actually get more volume and scale on ads. But the problem is a lot of businesses, especially that don't have like VC money, they don't necessarily have the cash float to be able to say, you know what, I don't need to know about payback period for 12 entire months. So most of you are probably going to be on the shorter end of things. Now, this is kind of, we touched on this very briefly, but I told you that story about the fashion e-commerce that I'm working with. So they recently they're currently in the process of switching from this kind of like percentage of sale, what percentage of sales am I spending on ads model, like that's what the question asked, to more of an LTV model. So again, my customer is worth, okay, so I'm Lululemon. Great when you can be Lululemon, but let's just pretend for a second. So I'm Lululemon, the lifetime value of my customer is $900 because they come in and they buy all this stuff and it's really expensive. Okay, so that means that I can afford to spend up to $300 because you usually want your CAC and your LTV. Your CAC is customer acquisition cost. LTV is lifetime value. You want the ratio of those two to be lifetime value is 3x CAC. So if the lifetime value is $900, then gosh, and I know that really reliably, then gosh, I can afford to spend $300 on a customer. So it's less about the percentage of ad spend against the number of sales and more about like, what is the lifetime value of a customer, no matter when they come in, whether that's today on this ad or on a different ad tomorrow, it's going to be the $900. And so that really is what I encourage you to move towards. It's really, really hard in e-commerce for a number of reasons that we probably can't get into in this call, but it is possible. And if you use Shopify, for example, there are even plugins or third-party apps that can help you automatically calculate your lifetime value.
Great. I know we talked a lot about SEO, and just want to remind everyone that the Tory Burch Foundation has an amazing tool, a toolkit on our website on torybirchfoundation.org that's free that can help you understand SEO. We collaborated with Google on this tool, so be sure to check that out. It will really help you. And Susan, you've been so generous with your time. I know we're actually over time, but before we go, what's the one thing that you want everyone in our community to explore today to further grow their business?
I would say that the one thing that I encourage everybody to explore and pay way more attention to is actually just your customer. I know it's kind of cheesy to say that, and of course a marketing person's going to say that, but it's true. We don't know our customers as well as we think that we do. I would want you to understand, are they on mobile? Are they on desktop? What geographic regions are they from? Within those geo regions, what cities are they from? What times of day are they most likely transacting? Then on the sort of non-quantitative side, what do they care about? What are their hopes and dreams? What are their biggest fears? Because a lot of decision making is actually driven by fear, and some of it is driven by dreams, by aspiration. If you're to be a successful business selling to those customers, you have to know them so intimately, but you also have to know them at scale. So you want the qualitative, what do they care about? Who are they? As well as the quantitative. Who are they in a quantitative aggregate sense? So that's the one thing that I would leave you with is go out, do that research, dig into your Google Analytics if you have it set up. If you don't have it set up, fine. Go out and call some customers. Talk to them on Zoom. Talk to them in person if you're able to talk to them in person. Send out surveys. Mail out surveys in the mail. I don't care what you do, but get that intel, because that is the number one thing that is going to inspire your marketing from here into the future, even as all these channels change, even as the different tactics change. Your customer is your customer, and you need to know who they are.
Well, thank you, Susan. This has been so great. I'm so grateful that you've spent more than an hour with us hitting on all these topics. And I know folks are going to want to continue to follow your work. So how can they do that?
So I had my LinkedIn on the slides, but I also will just share my Twitter. That's probably the easiest. It's just Susan F. Su. My first name, S-U-S-A-N, as you can see on the Zoom. My middle initial, which is F, which sounds just like S, but it's F as in Friday. And then my last name, Susan F. Su, and that's me on Twitter. And feel free to reach out to me there. I'm always on there reading at least. So I would love to stay in touch that way.
Wonderful. And we'll make sure to type that into the chat. And we've had so many folks say, how can I rewatch this? And the good news is this webinar will be on our YouTube channel, on the Tory Burch Foundation YouTube channel. So you can rewatch it and rewatch it again and take notes. And I know we continue to update our financial tools. So check out torybirchfoundation.org. We know that the deadline for PPP is just 10 days away, and we know that is a very confusing process, and hopefully we've given you all the answers you could possibly need on our FAQ, so check that out. As I mentioned, we have an email, an e-commerce tool, we have an SEO toolkit, so check out all these resources on our website, and of course, our YouTube channel, and know that we will be returning our webinar series this September. So be on the lookout. We'll have a whole calendar schedule for the fall, and we hope that you'll join us. And as always, please take a minute to fill out and complete the survey that we send. We design each session based on your feedback. And as we're planning for the fall, we want to know from you what topics you want to discuss. Where are you frustrated? How can we help? Because we're here for you. So thanks so much, everyone. Be well and stay in touch.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.